Hi, this is Dave, and before we get to the show, I wanted to ask you a favor. One of our goals this year is to grow the show so that What Does Star Wars Mean to You reaches more listeners. And that's where we're asking you for help. And it's really easy. Wherever you listen to us, please hit that subscribe button. If you're liking the show, give us a 5-star rating and review on the platform you listen to us. We make a lot of fun of the algorithm and the smash that button thing, but it really does help us get noticed by new fans. And if you want to join in on the conversation, find us on social at Star Wars Mean to You. That's Star Wars Mean, the number 2 in the letter U. Now, let's chat some Star Wars.
And then I love BT, who's like his assassin droid who just like sprays fire at everything.
Hello there, and welcome to What Does Star Wars Mean to You, the show where we look at Star Wars from a certain point of view, yours. Now, Elora and I usually have a guest, but we're trying something new. As the show evolves, we're going to do these episode between episodes. They're slightly shorter episodes, and they give us a chance to talk about the previous week's guest.
A mini-sode, as you might say. Yeah.
Yes. In the common parlance, a mini-sode. and also share our own point of view of Star Wars, as well as Matthew Freeman's essays. He does this wonderful newsletter called AHCH-TO BABY, and you can find the links in the podcast notes, and we're also going to talk about things that we want to talk about.
And that our guests brought up.
If you're liking the show, please subscribe and rate us. It really helps get the word out there. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram and Threads, maybe Blue Skies, Facebook, at Star Wars Mean to You. That's at Star Wars Mean, the number 2 in the letter U. And so for this episode between episodes minisode, last week we had Rob Salkowitz on.
Yeah, that was really fun.
He's a professor at Washington University.
The University of Washington. Yeah.
University of Washington. I apologize, University of Washington. I'm sure a lot of University of Washington people were like, what? Washington University? That's not us.
All the dogs have tuned out now. Yeah.
Anyway, he's a professor in transmedia, big into comic books, and he talked about Dr. Aphra as a character who deserved more of a story platform beyond the comics.
Yeah.
And Elora was also talking about getting more into comics. And I thought, well, this is a perfect time to cover Vader from Marvel Comics in 2015, issues 1 to 12.
Yeah, just kind of a nice little kickstart there.
Yeah, right? And who better to kickstart it with than Vader?
Well, yeah, I think Rob said it in his interview that he's the most interesting character in the whole franchise.
He is. In a way, he is the central character in the franchise.
Yeah. What I'm enjoying about what we've read so far in the 2015 Darth Vader comics is how it kind of is bridging the gap between 4 and 5. And in terms of like Darth Vader as a character, you know, his obsession with Luke and a lot of like his internal conflict, like he's having a lot of flashbacks to his time, you know, living as Anakin essentially, and Padme and with Obi-Wan, but he's still undergoing this search for more power. I haven't gotten past book 15 yet, but I think that what's ultimately going to be his driving force for his hunt for Luke is the potential power that Luke holds. And I don't know if we know yet if that's so that he can wield it with him or to take it out. Yeah, so like all of that in terms of like the character building of Vader going into episode 5 has been really interesting from the perspective of somebody who hasn't dove into the books yet and now is. How much story and character development's been out there that I've just missed. Meanwhile, there's fans listening to this like, well, then what business do you have being on a Star Wars podcast?
All the business in the world.
Thank you.
And a microphone. I think those are the 2 qualifications.
Well, but that we always said like that was going to be part of the journey was like kind of diving more into the universe. But yeah, should we dive into the books themselves?
Yeah, let's dive into the books. Let me give a little background. Now, Disney launched its reboot of the Star Wars comics in 2015 with 2 books, Darth Vader and Star Wars. Maybe it's just called Vader. The stories followed the immediate aftermath of the Battle of Yavin, gave us never-before stories of our heroes and villains' lives. In Star Wars, we followed the rebels as they escaped the Empire, and on the flip side, or the dark side, we followed Vader as he is punished by the Emperor for his failings to get the Death Star plans back and the destruction of the Death Star, as well as Vader's own mission to discover the identity of the Force user who destroyed it. The first 12 issues are written by Kieran Killen, with art by Salvador Larroca, and they're full of political intrigue, manipulation, and a droid whose sole focus and delight is to torture and kill living beings. You know, all the things you'd expect in a Vader comic.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so we chose the first 12 issues because it is the premiere of Dr. Aphra. It is the premiere of 000 and BT1. Dr. Aphra is kind of a anthropologist. I always just said Indiana Jones of the Star Wars universe.
She calls herself an anthropologist, though, and a scientist.
Yes.
Yeah.
And 000 is a protocol droid, loves to torture people. And BT1 is kind of his sidekick, Astromech.
Yeah. The assassin side of the droid empire was really fun for me to dive into.
Well, it's really interesting. They have these droids who want to kill people. It's and so openly.
Well, yeah. I mean, it kind of speaks to what we were chatting about in my initial interview for this pod. Is droids are so much a part of their programming, but they're also so much a product of their environment.
Yeah.
I wrote down some of my favorite 000 quips. Sorry, can't even say this with a straight face. Patience is a virtue for the feeble. Was one of my favorites. They say droids lack imagination, but I can vividly picture the delightful screams of these organics will admit. Was pretty great. I also love, they capture his ruthfulness, and his lack of remorse, and he has this morbid sense of humor, though. I love that this concept that the protocol droids all are kind of like this comic relief in the story, but this is very much the dark comedic side of that.
Yes.
Which is really fun. And then I love BT, who's his assassin droid who just sprays fire at everything. But I love how he says almost nothing. You rarely see him giving off any sort of astromech frequency, the beeps.
Yeah. Yes.
But he's revealed to be this mastermind of of
chaos.
War and chaos. Yeah, it's hilarious to me. 000 says something along the lines at one point of he doesn't say much, but he's a real planner. I just love this concept that he's just silent, but highly deadly.
It's so amazing to me that Dr. Aphra not only hangs out with them, but employs them in a way. They're the C-3PO and R2-D2 to her Luke Skywalker.
Well, let's talk about Dr. Aphra, because that was kind of the initial urge to read what am I trying to say? That was our initial prompt, right? From Rob, was that he felt like Dr. Aphra needed to be a more kind of canonly focused character. And I think you and I were chatting about this in a prep call before this, where I was like, well, isn't the books canon? And you were like, us old schoolers mean film canon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in the 80s, in the 90s, I really would argue up until the MCU, is that there were the movies and that was canon. Mm-hmm. And then the books, if it was a hardback, it was somewhat canon. It could easily be reversed by the movies. I think famously, Timothy Zahn, who wrote the Thrawn trilogy in the 90s, came up with the name Coruscant for the governmental center of the galaxy. And Lucas had to use that in Phantom Menace because they considered it canon. But I think then the paperbacks and the comics, I mean, when you look at comic books are broken down to 6-issue arcs primarily. And those 6 issues are like a 2-hour movie. And so between 2015 and 2024, we've had, 9 years? We've had Vader comics that whole time. So that's almost 18 2-hour movies that now are all canon. And that's a lot. Like my favorite character, Corbin, who's a cyborg with a combination, who has a Admiral Akbar head with a General Grievous body. That guy is canon now.
Yeah. I think there's a lot. I mean, well, so we can even back up a little bit further before we dive into Dr. Aphra, and that's just kind of like what our thoughts are on the books, this series, in terms of like filling in those gaps, because I'm only 15 issues in, but I would say that it's really established an interesting dynamic between Vader's relationship with Palpatine. There's this weird kind of like fear and suspicion and like struggle for power between the two that will carry through to the film trilogy. Yeah. And I'm excited to see kind of how they build that in the rest of the comic series. One thing we were talking about too is how difficult it is to build suspense where in a story in a new format where you know the main characters aren't going to die.
Yes.
Or you already know like the end of their story, or you know, wherever it is that we've gotten to in their story at such point in the future. I think they did a really good job with that. But yeah, so there's that relationship conflict. There's this discovery that he discovers that he has a son in the early part of the series. Like that's a huge deal, big reveal. And so there's this kind of like search for Luke. But what about you? What is your takeaway in terms of that like building of that gap?
I think they do an incredible job of like finding some story elements to be very compelling that, you know, you didn't know you wanted when you watched the movies. For example, you were talking about, you know, like Vader didn't know it was Luke Skywalker who did it. He just knew it was like, oh, some schmuck who's strong.
It was some rebel pilot and
some rebel scum.
Yeah.
And you know, I said that I always looked at Vader and Anakin as slightly separate, but this really merges the two in a way that the movies don't, and that's really interesting. And then the relationship of the Emperor to Vader is so, like, the Emperor is always one of my favorite characters because he's just so catty and he's just so evil and so, like, snide. He's like the worst of all of us. And, like, he's like that inner voice that hates you. And he just presses all of Vader's buttons. And, of course, you know, seeing Vader be like he does.
He failed.
He did fail.
Yeah.
And seeing that reaction is really interesting because in Empire, he is a little bit stronger. But he also, you know, he lets Dr. Aphra go. He doesn't just kill her, which I've always, and that is part of that Anakin-Vader relationship. And it's also, you know, he's very pragmatic. He's like, I still have use for you. So
yeah, she's a utility. Yeah.
Yes.
Circling on your Palpatine comment, though, I mean, I think building on that relationship is probably one of the most important pieces to this series. Because there's this interesting, like, Vader's power comes from his anger and his envy and his, you know, Anakin is very naturally powerful. I mean, he was assumed to be the chosen one and all this stuff, but he becomes even more powerful as Darth Vader. And a lot of that's fueled by his anger. And I'm not saying anything that any Star Wars fan doesn't know, but I find it fascinating how much Palpatine's manipulation plays a role in Vader's power, because inherently the ability to be manipulated is a weakness. So his weakness is also his biggest strength, which is really interesting.
I completely agree with you. It humanizes Vader a little bit. And maybe that's why I always looked at them as two different people. That Vader seemed inhuman until the end of Jedi, when you're looking at the chronological release of the movies. And then Anakin brings some humanity to him, but the movies don't fully interconnect those two characters, Vader and Anakin, as, look, we've all had a terrible boss who manipulated us and made us do awful things that we didn't like, but maybe pushed us to be a little bit stronger.
Yeah. This is the magic of comic books and stories that branch off of those that provide more context and dive deeper.
Yes.
But speaking of diving deeper, Dr. Aphra.
Dr. Aphra.
What was your first reactions?
My first reaction was, first of all, I remember when I read this back in 2015, as it was coming out. I didn't realize Dr. Aphra was going to be such a major popular character.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed her, and I felt like she was a Star Wars character right from the bat. Now, and what I mean by that, and I don't know if I can like just list out all the things that, oh, this makes a Star Wars character, but I will contrast that with another character from these 12 issues that I thought was not a Star Wars character at all, but felt very much like a comic book character, and that's what's his name? Carbon.
Yeah.
Carbon. I'm sorry, but Admiral Akbar and Grievous's body just drove. I did not like that. But I do think it also provides a good comparison of like, oh, she feels very Star Wars.
Yeah.
She's scrappy. She's like a female Han Solo. And she has that morally gray area that like Han had. But where was I going with this?
I don't know, you were talking about how she feels like a Star Wars character, but you took issue with, is it Corbin? Is that how you've been pronounced? Because I was saying carbon in my head.
Yeah, it's carbon. I think it's carbon. I said Corbin in my head because I'm like, no way I'm saying carbon.
His name's not Carbon. Well, so wait, putting a pause on Dr. Aphra, because it is interesting because he's kind of this like cyborg hybrid, and that was a big theme in the early part of this series that we've read. So like, what was your thoughts on these like cyborg and like the Astari twins and everything Palpatine was kind of building there as a potential replacement if Vader truly didn't work out for what his uses?
So Dr. Silo, who's this guy, he's a cyborg as well. He creates these 5 individuals who wield lightsabers.
Yeah.
They are cyborgs so that they have like, they're stronger, faster. They're the $6 million man in the Star Wars universe, basically. And but as Vader points out, they can't use the Force. Mm-hmm. And I felt like you're blowing up on the launch pad with that, right?
Yeah.
Like, they can't use the Force. Vader's just going to wipe them. Like, they were never a threat to me because Vader could just be like, oh, okay, you're all dead now.
But they serve as a great tool for that kind of power struggle and relationship you're talking about, where he's essentially suggesting that these non-Force sensitive cyborg children that wield lightsabers. I mean, they're not children anymore, but it's insinuated that they raised them kind of in the same way that like the clone army was. They could undermine Lord Vader, and how much that angered him. He almost strikes them down right there in the hallway. So they serve that purpose really well.
But you bring up another interesting kind of relationship, which is Vader with himself. Mm-hmm. And how you said that he almost struck them down in the hallway right there. Yeah. Vader is slowly learning through this that like, oh, I need to be more controlled and more like, I can't just strike out in anger. I have to like think things through and use my anger to propel me through that. And I think that's kind of an interesting effect on the canon of Star Wars itself.
Yeah, I mean, he almost kind of, as we've been reading through the series, and I'm excited to see where it goes, like his character in this series is coming to the awareness that he is who he is because he was made that way. And so I think he wants to maintain his position and power because who knows what his ultimate motivators are, but at a certain point, it's all he has left, right? So he's out there collecting his own resources and building his own kind of side army, even if it might just be an anthropologist and 2 murderous droids to start. So, which might be our perfect segue into Dr. Aphra, going back there. Yes. I don't know. Yeah.
We left her back there. Let's bring her back.
Let's bring her back. My first reaction to her was quite a shallow one, very surface level one. I thought, okay, this is a character who's drunk the Kool-Aid of the Empire's propaganda and is maybe even acting a bit out of self-preservation. Who knows? But I really quickly came to realize what a truly complex character she is.
Yes.
And it's only within the first 15 issues, so I'm excited to kind of keep going on her journey. There's the whole sequence where they're interrogating the doctor, the mortician who prepared Padme for burial on Naboo. Yeah. And, they're trying to get confirmation that she did birth a child. And in that initial interrogation before 000 has his delight, She talks about growing up in the Galactic War and how her mother kind of pretended that it wasn't happening. It didn't exist. And what that meant in terms of them having to like relocate for promises of like a new and, more, well, I guess just promising homestead. And that, at the end of it all, it resulted in her mother literally dead in a ditch somewhere and her having to become the very thing I think she probably despised in order to survive. I wrote down her line. She says, "The thing with wars, if the war doesn't get you, the scum opportunist profiting from the chaos will." So she basically realized that was her only option. And I think she's morally, like, there's a lot of ambiguity there.
Yeah.
Right now. Who knows what will come out of that? She's kind of playing both sides a bit. And she gets caught for that. But it's interesting. She's kind of got her own hidden agenda, but she also gives off the vibe of, and who knows if this is just a manipulation tactic she used. We haven't gotten too far into the series yet, but she seems kind of done. I mean, she literally says to him when he corners her about this kind of what he would consider treason, maybe, to put the lightsaber, just make it quick, go directly through my throat. Yeah, it just kind of seems like she's basically like buying her time.
Well, it's also like, it shows that she's very secure within herself.
Yeah.
Like, I think in the sense that she is smart enough to be able to tell bad things are going to happen and strong enough to face it head on.
Yeah. But there's an interesting thread there where she voices that she blames Padme for not being strong enough of a queen to have prevented this kind of galactic uprising. And so for a while, I was wondering if her search for Luke didn't also have kind of a more personal, there wasn't like a more personal mission there as well.
Yeah.
But then I was like, I don't think she would. But no, she does know. She does know that he's the son of Padme. That is confirmed. So like that's kind of where her character is so complex and fascinating for me as we were starting this series. Is she too is almost, I think, looking for some sort of like revenge.
Yes. Yes.
Do you see where I'm going with that? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It ties into the themes of revenge within the whole.
Yeah. And so maybe that's why she's okay with some of that kind of moral ambiguity and just sending 000 in to do his thing and to extract information. Yeah. And no matter what the cost might be, the human cost might be, because it's subtly revealed that, she's quite angry over the events of kind of her childhood and her family falling apart. And I think she blames Padme's leadership for that. So what does she want with Luke? I don't know. We'll find out.
So let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Within the broader context of Star Wars and everything you know about it currently, what did Vader issues 1 through 12 mean to you?
Oh, well, I think for me it meant opening up the universe a bit more. There's a lot of really interesting side characters to dive into and into their journey. I'm always fascinated by stories that involve some sort of like character development through wartime. I think it's one of the reasons why I loved Andor. I love that kind of complexity that comes out of kind of growing up within Resistance. But for me, I think what it has the most meaning to it is the character development of Vader going into episode 5 so far. I think we're getting inside of his head, which is a place that is not as terrifying as I thought it would be. I think there's a lot of struggle between who he was and who he is now and is continuing to become. I'll be curious to see if his characters... I mean, his memories already feel very distorted to me as I'm reading them. Like he's only remembering like what I would call like the mountaintop moments. He's only remembering the highs, at least in like what they're choosing to focus on. So how much of that continues to get clouded as he goes further and further on this quest for his own power and this kind of subtle Cold War he has going on with the Emperor himself.
That's a good way of putting it.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, it is.
They're both collecting resources on either side, kind of determining if they're going to need to use them. Yeah, so that's what it's meant to me. Is it's meant that I now have the opportunity to understand Darth Vader as a character much more, and it's fun.
Yeah.
It is. It's fun. It's fun to dive into the characters that you grew up with and understand them from another point of view and from another storyteller's perspective too. I mean, you know, this is all fitting in within that kind of canon storyline, you know, that George Lucas crafted, but there's a lot of really amazing storytellers and artists that are choosing to kind of take up the responsibility of filling in some of those gaps, and you can see their perspective in it, and it's so yeah, it's been very enjoyable.
Yeah, I would agree with you. For me, it really is about Vader and his relationships, because I think it's fascinating to take a villain, especially a stoic, masked villain who you can't read his face and emotions.
Good point.
And then give it so much emotion.
Yeah.
And it's also that combining the characters, really layering in, you know, it's like a Darth Vader sandwich where it's like Vader, Anakin, Vader. And seeing that it's not just one or the other, but it is him.
Yeah. That was you took my word salad and this time and made it much more, put an eloquent little bow on that. Yeah.
And now it's time for the AHCH-TO BABY segment by Matthew Freeman. One of the elements we're looking to do here at WDSWMTY, that was a mouthful, is find other points of view to highlight. Now, Matthew Freeman was a guest on the show. He's a playwright and director, but he also writes a newsletter called AHCH-TO BABY. You can find the link in the podcast notes or go to matthewfreeman.substack.com to subscribe and read his newsletter. If you're a Star Wars fan, it's well worth your time. It's a quick read, always positive, always thoughtful, and right now, we're lucky to have him here with us to read one of his pieces. Thank you so much for joining us, Matthew.
Hello, I'm Matthew Freeman, and this is Star Wars, What Star Wars Isn't, originally published on my newsletter, AHCH-TO BABY, on November 17th, 2023. Thanks for listening. What Star Wars Isn't. It's difficult to write something new about 1977's Star Wars, what it is, how it was made, what it means to me, what it may mean to you. The original Star Wars Episode 4 A New Hope, or Star Wars A New Hope, has been replicated, reviewed, revered, reimagined, rebooted, and rethought for decades. Star Wars, the template for tentpoles, is, Star Wars. What's left to say that hasn't been said? So instead of writing about the many things Star Wars is, I'd like to start by taking stock of what Star Wars isn't. Star Wars is not a film about redemption. Redemption is one of the most persistent, recognizable themes in the Star Wars saga. The original 3 films coalesce into a story about the redemption of Darth Vader, the ultimate galactic antagonist. The prequel trilogy only deepens the redemption story, paralleling Anakin's fall with the fall of the entire Republic. There's a galaxy to be redeemed, in essence, not just one lost Jedi. The sequel trilogy goes all in on the redemption theme, not only centering the conflict around the redemption of Ben Solo, but also giving Han, Luke, and Leia a hand to play in the redemption of their lost child. Redemption appears everywhere. Lando redeems himself after betraying his friends. Boba Fett redeems himself after trying to kill our heroes. The Mandalorian redeems himself after turning the child over to the Imperial Remnant. IG-11 redeems himself and becomes a protector after nearly assassinating Grogu. It's a subject you can find underlined in pen in every Star Wars script. But redemption is not the theme of Star Wars itself. Star Wars is also not a film about confronting fear and hate. This overarching theme about grappling with darkness, confronting fear, rejecting hatred, overcoming anger, and letting go of what we fear to lose is asserted directly in prequels, sequels, and the surrounding series, from Anakin's fall to Luke's confrontation with his father, to Ahsoka overcoming her fear of being a mentor, to Rey's rejection of the throne of the Sith. The temptations of power and rage are laced throughout the series, almost everywhere, except Star Wars itself. Nowhere in the original film is a Jedi tempted to fall, to give in to hate or anger, or wrestle with their fear. The closest Star Wars gets to this beat is Han Solo, an avowed scoundrel choosing heroism over reward, but it's never framed as a choice between light and darkness. If these familiar tropes are not a part of the original Star Wars, what is it about? What does the text of this spiderweb of storylines and timelines and families and characters have to say? Well, chiefly Star Wars is a contest between faith in technology and faith in the spirit. The unlikely carrier of this message early in the movie is Darth Vader himself. During one of the all-time great Star Wars scenes, hilariously officious Imperials reject Vader's sorcerer's ways and revel in the supremacy of the Death Star, quote, the ultimate power in the universe. It's the Dark Lord who asserts that their technological terror is insignificant next to the power of the Force. Darth Vader may believe this, but he himself represents the over-reliance on machines, at least in the first film. He is a technological terror the Empire has constructed, a monstrous, faceless machine leading stormtroopers that are both inhumane and inhuman, masked and anonymous. When he and his wingmen fly TIE fighters, they look as if they are not so much sitting in their cockpits as absorbed by them. Our heroes, though, are messy, natural, frowsy, and human. They squabble, they're anything but uniform, even the droids. They're not single-minded in their purpose like the Empire. Luke Skywalker and Ben Kenobi are a duo in earth tones, blending into the sand and the rocks. Han Solo's ship is a piece of junk, a flying bachelor pad, and he lives with basically his dog. Princess Leia is just so tired of this and can't quite land on an accent. The rebellion is not surrounded by pill-shaped lights in long, flat corridors. It's nestled in an abandoned temple in a jungle teeming with life. And their ally is the Force. While Darth Vader uses the Force to choke a few haters, he rarely uses its power beyond that. Ben Kenobi's interpretation of the Force isn't about abilities, it's about not letting your senses deceive you. Luke is first trained to feel the Force by his sight being taken away. In the final act of the film, he reenacts this lesson in order to make the impossible possible. As Grand Moff Tarkin refuses to evacuate when it's clear the rebels pose a threat, believing he is untouchable, wrapped inside a metal planet, entombed in his own machine, Luke makes the opposite choice. He turns off his computer and trusts in something more. At this point, "Use the Force, Luke," is tossed off so casually it's easy to forget the line's original context. It's not about lifting rocks. It's about using the Force instead of using the computer, about trusting energy, the divine, in the spirit, instead of the false sense of security and precision that technology can bring. It's one of the few missteps, I think, of Rogue One, in explaining all too literally why the Death Star has a tiny flaw that could destroy the station. It was put there on purpose by a spy. It slightly undercuts the hubris of the Empire. They believe so firmly in the infallibility of their giant gun, they leave it exposed to the one thing they can't fathom, that a less powerful group would risk their lives to stop them. There's something profound about Star Wars, a franchise that is synonymous with pushing technological boundaries, using that innovation to express skepticism of an over-reliance on machines. Is it hypocritical? George Lucas, I think, never believed in technology as a shortcut, but as an enabler of the imagination. He wanted what was in his head translated to the screen and stubbornly insisted on innovations to make that a reality. Certainly, there are studios and creators that fall back on technology instead of investing in story, as we often see in less than Star Wars results. I imagine Lucas's ILM band thought of themselves as making special modifications to the Millennium Falcon, not inventing a planet-killing weapon. But did they become the very thing they swore to destroy? That's another conversation. This is all to say that the most well-worn themes of the Star Wars saga are, in fact, departures from the first film's primary interest. Star Wars was about having faith, not just hope, that there is a benevolent force in the universe, and if you are willing to trust in it, it will take care of you. If you have too much pride in the material, in the mechanical and the artificial, then pride cometh before a fall. Later films do touch on technology versus nature, The Phantom Menace and Return of the Jedi especially, but not in a way that is meant to contrast computer science and the psyche in quite the same way Star Wars does. Perhaps the increasingly secular society in which we live has meant writers are less likely to tease out themes of overt faith in their narratives, or maybe the evolving themes were more rife with human drama and therefore attractive to creators. After all, Deus Ex the Force isn't going to be as consistently dramatic as a psychodrama between parents and their children. Frankly, if George Lucas had mandated that Star Wars' theme was faith versus technology and then attempted to slavishly deliver that moral in all subsequent sequels, it would have been an impoverished effort. For whatever reason, other themes, such as redemption, outpaced the original's man versus machine motif and became more central to the saga overall. Still, I hope the subject of A New Hope gets as much contemplation as less weighty matters like its abstract cultural influence. Questioning technology is more relevant to us today than it was in the 1970s. Lucas's Star Wars may have evoked World War II and the dangers of the atomic bomb, and yes, awfully, Nazis are a thing again, but a reliance on tech was nowhere near today's epidemic levels. Now technology is relied on for everything from booking a plane ticket to taking pictures of food, to waging war with remote drones, to determining who should get a mortgage, to which neighbors should be policed. Machines are doing quite a lot of our thinking for us, often convincing us to substitute data for our own intuition. As we face a future where AI will tempt us to overuse and dependence, it's worth revisiting what Luke Skywalker learned at the Battle of Yavin. Listen to your inner voice. Turn off your targeting computer. And let go.
So that's our episode for this week, but let us know what you think. What do you think of the relationship between Vader and the Emperor during the time between episodes 4 and episode 5? What are some of the new characters introduced that you really like?
Most importantly, though, 000 or BT, who's badder?
Oh yeah. You know, I don't want to choose between the two because I think both of them will kill me.
Oh yeah, we wouldn't stand a chance. I do think that BT would win in a fight, but sound off on social and let us know what you think.
Yeah, just let us know at Star Wars Mean to You. That's at Star Wars Mean, the number 2 and the letter U. And next week we talk to Dan from S Centralized on Twitter. He is a huge fan of the novels, really great insights, and
also about what Star Wars means to him.
Yeah.
The whole reason we're here, folks.
So that's all next week. Until then, may the Force be with you.
And with you.
Here we go. Okay. Hello there. Oh, f me. It's just, this is what happened.
And there's our cold open. We're going to get this.
Hello there, and welcome.
Hello there.
Sorry. One more time, I'll get it. The thing is, my mind just goes blank, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm talking about. This actually will be like, maybe put it at the very end, like 5 minutes after the close, so it's like a secret CD track.
This is our Marvel secret scene.
Yes, exactly.
You didn't turn this off quick enough, and now you get to listen to us figure out how we're going to record.
Hey, did you fall asleep? If you fell asleep, wake up. It's morning.
Oh, God.
Hi, this is Dave. And before we get to the show, I wanted to ask you a favor. One of our goals this year is to grow the show so that What Does Star Wars Mean to You reaches more listeners. And that's where we're asking you for help. And it's really easy. Wherever you listen to us, please hit that subscribe button. If you're liking the show, give us a 5-star rating and review on the platform you listen to us. We make a lot of fun of the algorithm and the smash that button thing, but it really does help us get noticed by new fans. And if you want to join in on the conversation, find us on social at Star Wars Mean to You. That's Star Wars Mean, the number 2 and the letter U. Now, let's chat some Star Wars.